All right. Hello, LinkedIn Live Land. I am Jordana Cole, Chief Product and Research Officer from Shiftwell, and we are back finishing up our series on the 6 elements that drive human performance and potential. And I'm really excited about today's topic, which is environment. And we define environment as your surroundings and how you engage with them, because this is the one that's truly external to the individual, but plays such an impactful role in each of our abilities to be at our best. And yet it's often overlooked. We might ask questions about environment of our employees, but we tend to focus on things like, do you have the equipment to do your job? Do you have the space you need to do your job? Do you have the tools? That's the bare minimum. So today we're looking at environment through the deeper Shiftwell lenses of how we think about environment from a lens of security or safety, both physically and psychologically, how we think about environment in the lens of fit to the person, and how we think about it at home and at work and its role in shaping whether people feel grounded, energized, and able to perform. So I'm thrilled to have my partner in crime or partner in thrive, I'll call it, in our LinkedIn Live today, Niels Gott. And Niels is not only an incredible person who I've had the privilege to get to work with together on some leadership work. He's an executive coach. He's an organizational consultant, a positive psychology practitioner, and a retired military officer. And I feel like, Niels, you have so much great experience, expertise, focus, interest in the role that our environment, our psychological environments, our physical environments play on human potential and performance, even in difficult circumstances. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Jordan. I'm thrilled to be your partner in Thrive, and I think this is a fantastic topic to be digging into. So I am thrilled and excited to be here, and thanks for the warm intro. You know that I'm a card-carrying member of the Mutual Admiration Society. I adore you and getting to work with you. So thanks for inviting me on.
Yeah, it's like a big hug fest when you and I are together. So yeah,
Of
I
course.
we'll keep that going. We'll keep that going. So let's dive into our topic at hand. High level, when you hear me say environment is your surroundings and how you engage with them, what comes up for you when you hear that?
Just like you were saying before, some of the first things I think about are the physical
Mm,
environment. I think about my very first big boy job when I had an ergo assessment, and the specialist came out and measured the height of my chair and desk and distance to the monitor and all those kinds of great things. And that's an important starting point. And I'm glad that over the years, organizations have gotten a lot better about making sure that physically the environment is there to support the team and the employees so that they can do their best work. But I think what I next go to is what is the emotional
mm,
environment of that space? I think about some of the leaders that I loved getting to work for, both in the military and in the civilian world, and some of the ones that I kind of dreaded working for. And while it's not necessarily visible, it's palpable
hmm,
both ways. When you've got a great leader that makes it okay to try stuff out, makes it okay to screw up. After all, that treats that as a learning opportunity. That feels so different from a space where everybody's trying not to get in trouble. Maybe they've got a very toxic leader that is good at shooting the messenger, is very focused on control and
mm,
trying to micromanage things.
hmm,
Emotionally, that's not a great space to be in. And so those are the things that I think about as we get into environment. It's not just the physical manifestation. And do you have the tools, like you said,
mhm.
to literally do your job? But do you have the emotional space? As a leader, are you creating the space for people to be able to do their best work?
Space is such a powerful word. And, I'm hearing that kind of physical space, that energetic space. You do a ton of work with leaders. So, how do you help leaders understand the impact of the space, of that environment on not only individual performance and well being, but their teams holistically?
Mm. I was working with a leader just recently. We were talking about this very topic, and one of the things that he had started to realize was how quickly his team tunes into how he's showing up.
Mm,
And so he might not even be aware that he's feeling particularly stressed that day and that that is showing up in lots of nonverbal ways.
hmm,
His team picks up on that right away. And it once he started to notice that, he realized that he wants his team to know that he's got their back and that
mm,
um, anything that he's dealing with personally, he's not going to make that their problem. And it's not about trying to not be human at work. I know that that's another thing that a lot of leaders can try to compartmentalize. And there's the work self, and there's the home self, and maybe there's other personas that
yeah.
they take on in different parts of their lives. What I like about this particular leader is that he's very intentional about being authentic, and that those
Mm,
his principles shine through all those different spaces in his life. But again, he was really tuned into the shadow of the leader.
mm,
And it goes both ways again. So when he's stressed or feeling anxious, that feeling, that emotion is contagious. But likewise, when he's feeling particularly optimistic or motivated or excited about a recent success or a new challenge or a win that the team's got, that can be equally infectious in a good way. And so the thing that we were focused on is it's not about trying to keep a facade on. Back to authenticity, it is about how can that leader be intentional about the way that he shows up. And so that's a
mm,
lesson I like to use with a lot of leaders that find themselves being more tuned into their shadow, as it
mm,
were. It's part of it's part of the self-awareness. You've got to be able to lead yourself before you can lead others effectively.
yeah.
And that's one of the tools, is just to be tuned into what's going on internally, and tuning into that before I step into that work environment, whether it's virtual or physically in the office or what have you.
And I love that you bring that up because, while we're treating each of these elements as unique things, one of the things that we talk about at Shiftwell is that we are each a blend of these elements. And they all kind of combine together to impact how we show up, what we do for ourselves and for others. And I think what you're hitting on is how you are yourself, your internal space, which could be even your mindset, which is another element that we talked about, can actually impact the external space that you create as a leader for your team around you, that energetic space, that physical space, and that shadow. And I love that term of the shadow of a leader. It's it's that extension of yourself that creates the space around you. So I really appreciate you calling that out and the importance of intentionality. And I like that you used intentionality because when we think about environment, a lot of times I think we see it as a static thing, but environment is something that plays a really dynamic role. So what do you think about that? Like why
Mhm.
is environment so dynamic in how we show up?
Mhm. I love that. And I think that there's lots of factors that play into that. I think it gets back to that emotional energy.
Mm,
Reminds me that I heard someone describe emotions as energy in motion. And
mm,
I think that that applies to that space as well. Because the dynamic quality of that space feeds on our emotions, first of
mm,
all. And so if there's a general mood that, oh my God, we're not going to hit our numbers this quarter, or some challenge feels overwhelming, it really negatively impacts the collective efficacy of that team. We've gotten ourselves into a sort of a below the mind mindset, that we're feeling pessimistic, feeling
mm,
cynical, not feeling capable. Of course, efficacy, self-efficacy, is the belief that I can do hard things, that I can rise to the occasion and accomplish the challenge. Collective efficacy, by extension, is that as a team, we've got confidence in our shared ability. We might not know the answer, the solution yet, but we're confident that we
mm,
can pull together and lean into each other's strengths. We can collaborate. We're innovative. We're creative. We've got grit. We're going to see this through. Um, I think that those are some of the things that play into that dynamic quality, because we bring our whole selves into that space, whether we realize it or not. And so everything that's happening in our lives, those emotions, they do have an energetic impact. But also, I think this is where, back to leadership and the shadow of the leader, I think part of the importance of great leadership is, and I know we'll talk a little bit more about psychological safety a little
Yeah.
bit coming up, but I think that a great leader creates the space where it's safe to try. And that's
Mm.
another thing that's another factor that can impact the dynamic quality of that space.
Creates a space where it's safe to try. That's a beautiful note. And yeah, let's go there because you started to go there around psychological safety. So at the outset of this session, I mentioned that we kind of see that our environment as two categories of things, as this concept of security, but this concept of fit. So let's dive into the security piece. And specifically, you kind of brought the concept of psychological safety up. That was a great example of what that looks like. It's a buzzword. A lot of people are talking about it. And I'm curious to get your perspective on what does that look like in everyday interactions beyond just a survey question.
Mhm. Right on. This reminds me of another short story. I was an agile coach a bunch of years ago, and there were a few of us coaches that worked together, and we had a team coming through. We called it a dojo. It was a team that was new to agile processes, and we're sort of giving them the orientation, a little bit of training. And so we're doing a debrief as coaches, and I'll call him Bob to protect the innocent, or guilty as it may be. But we're going, hey Bob, how's the psychological safety in that team? Oh, it's great. They get along fine. They laugh and they joke together, and yeah, it's really good. I was like, okay, that's great. It's not quite the same thing though, because psychological safety is about, not only is it making it safe to try, but it's about knowing and trusting that we can have hard conversations,
Mhm.
and that it's not going to be a personal attack, or that I can say something that might be a little bit contrarian, and I know that it won't be held against me. I know that we are debating ideas, and we are all vested in our shared success, and we're trying to find a solution to the challenge together. And we're going to have different ideas about what the right way is to accomplish the task, but that's okay, because that diversity of perspective and that diversity of opinion, the diversity of strength and talent, that's what makes us better as a team. And
Mm.
so that's where we can also get into other conversations about decision making lanes, because that's where things can get a little bit jammed up sometimes as well, is that we want to reach consensus and we want that good feeling vibe on the team. And that's good when we can have it. But I think we need to start from the place of knowing that we can have hard conversations and still have the relationship intact on the other side of that conversation. That it's not about, boy, Niels, your idea sucks, ergo I suck. It's about, you know, I see our path to success a little bit differently, and we can have completely different opinions, and they both actually can be right in some way. It gets back to that collective efficacy. How can we trust in each other's talents and abilities and commitment to our shared success, that it's not going to be interpersonal conflict or drama just because we have a different perspective?
I love what you just shared, and I so appreciate you really unpacking what that looks like, because I do think there's a lot of misnomers about what psychological safety is, and your call out that it's not the avoidance of conflict, and in fact, it's you and I are both fans of Brene Brown. It's the ability to rumble with it a bit more,
Yes.
in her words, and that recognition that you can have these conversations. You're obligated to have these conversations. You can take these interpersonal risks, and yet still have that relationship and that trust intact, because it's in service of that greater good. And you also mentioned the importance of bringing in diversity of thought, diversity of perspectives, diversity of ideas to make something even stronger. And that's, I think a good thing that we can be on the lookout of. How do I really know if the team environment I'm creating is one where there's psychological safety? Are people sharing different opinions, and not just that one voice, but multiple voices? Do people still have trust and relationships even when they rumble a bit? Do people lean into the hard conversations? Are we committed to the greater good? Do we have different opinions, perspectives, strengths coming into the team? Those are things that you can look for. And then as a leader, what am I doing to cultivate that? So I really appreciate you bringing all of that up. And I'll also plug another researcher for anybody who likes to geek out on this stuff like Niels and I do. Amy Edmondson is the preeminent researcher behind the term psychological safety. She's written a number of fantastic books, including Fearless Organizations, and I would encourage you to check that out if you want to think about how you can bring more psychological safe environments into your workplace. So I'm going to pivot a little bit. You have, such a fascinating background and the word safety, the words security. So we kind of bucket that into a bunch of different things. Shivwell, based on all the research that you and I know a lot about. So certainly we have the concept of psychological safety, which we've discussed. There's also physical safety. There's stability. And then there's financial security. And I know that most engagement surveys ask questions about, I'm paid fairly. But I don't think that we talk enough about financial security as an environmental factor, particularly in today's day and age where there's a lot of uncertainty about jobs, there's uncertainty at home. And I appreciated that you brought up the concept that we are whole people, that what's going on at home impacts our work lives and vice versa. So, given everything that's going on in the world right now, how do you see financial pressure or uncertainty influencing somebody's ability to be able to focus and perform?
It's such an important consideration. And I think that it's got a high degree of influence. For a long time, I've believed that when it comes to compensation, we should compensate people fairly, first of all, that we should pay them enough that we can take that off the table, that they're not worried about making ends meet. Uh, there's also, I mean, you've always got to weigh the band for the job category and the market rate and what the company can provide and all these things that come together. But not only do we need to try to take that off the table, but I'm a big fan of how can we incentivize the group. So
Mm,
often, organizations, for well-intentioned reasons, have the annual performance review, which I have misgivings with. I think there's lots of reasons, ways that could be improved, and reasons why. But also that annual performance review is tied to compensation.
yeah.
I had one boss a bunch of years ago that was experimenting with how can we shift this to team
Mm,
compensation. So rather than our bonuses being tied to individual performance, he created team goals, and so he had to sort of shoehorn this into Workday because it wasn't quite built. It's all traditionally built on individual performance and what are Niels's metrics and what is he being held accountable to. He tried to shift that to essentially we all had the same goal because we agreed as a team. These are the targets that we want to head towards. This is what we want to try to accomplish, and then that way we all receive the same percentage of a bonus once we hit those
mm.
targets. And so
Oh,
rather than it
wow.
being just an individual contributor, because the individual incentivization naturally puts us in conflict,
Mm,
whether we want it to or not, whether we realize it
mm,
or not. Because now, of course, if I'm worried about feeding my family and keeping a roof over my family's heads, and things are very uncertain right now, and things are more expensive, and a lot of folks are feeling that pinch. Obviously, I'm motivated to take care of my family, and so
yeah.
I'm going to want to perform for Niels. And how can I get the highest bonus? How can I get the best financial compensation for my family? That puts me at odds with my team, and it inadvertently, some of the second and third order effects, the unintended consequences, is that it puts us in this sort of competition rather than collaboration.
Mm,
And oftentimes, there's a little bit of competition is good. I think when it comes to team performance, collaboration is better. We need to be able to create the space where everybody can do their best work so that we can all succeed together. So I think that, that financial security can have such a tremendous impact, because if that's on my mind, it also puts me in a place of fear, a place of scarcity. And I think the research is very clear that when we're operating from a place of fear, we simply cannot do our best work
yeah.
because we're playing not to lose rather than playing to win. We're trying to not get in trouble. And it's all of these, we're in this deficiency gap mindset rather than taking some risks. What is possible? How can we be bolder? How can we be more innovative? If you're worried about losing your job and losing your livelihood, well, you're not going to take any risks. Bold and innovative is probably the last thing in your mind. It's how can I make sure that I don't screw up? And again, that doesn't really allow us to be our most creative selves. The fear also puts us in tunnel vision. And that's part of why we can't be as creative, because we're so narrowly focused on a particular problem or challenge, rather than, again, being bold or a little bit more innovative or willing to try new things.
Yeah, that comment of like we're playing to lose versus we're playing to win, that one hit. And especially because I mean the language of winning comes up in organizations all the time, right? Whether it's we need to win this deal, we need to win the quarter, the win-win-win of the triple bottom line, right? I feel like organizations to do all they do is win-win-win, no matter what. I had to do that, and I also it was really interesting hearing you say like playing for Niels versus playing for the team versus playing for the organization. And ultimately, that's what every single organizational leader wants, is that there is this shared commitment and accountability where we are in this kind of state where we are playing for the win for the collective, not just for the win for the self. And as you were talking about that team incentivization, it actually reminded me of something else of an organization that I used to work at, where employees could donate their PTO. So if you had leftover PTO at the end of the year, you could actually donate it to a pool, so that if there was somebody in the organization that had run out of PTO because they were a caregiver, or there was, an unexpected illness or something major going on at home, that they didn't have to worry, and they could apply anonymously to dip into this pool that the rest of the employee base donated to. And just that, what that did for the environment in creating, oh, I'm cared for, I feel this accountability and connection to this greater group, and I it's more of a feeling of abundance rather than risk. It's a more feeling of gain rather than loss. And it's a way that it can help free up some of the concerns for people to help them do their best work. And one of the things that I think about with you is your military background. So physical safety is a real thing in a military background. Psychological safety can be complex. The ability to have flexibility is pretty narrow, and your work and life are entwined, and you really do have to work for the people, not just for yourself, and be part of a collective. I'd love to hear just a little bit about your own experiences, and how that has really shaped your perspective on the role of physical, psychological environments enabling us to be at our best, and how that's kind of shaped how you help leaders today navigate that.
Yeah, right on. I think one of the first things that I realized is that it is a people business. It feels a little weird to talk about the military as a business. I mean, it's not about profit or bottom line or anything like that. But it's definitely an organization that relies on people first and foremost.
Mm.
And so, I first enlisted back in the late 90s, which makes me feel a little bit old realizing it now.
It's all good. It's all good.
But I eventually decided to become an officer because I saw leaders that seemed more self-serving than I felt was right.
Mm.
And not that I was sure that I was the best leader. I knew that my fellow soldiers, my brothers and sisters in arms, deserved the best, and that includes world-class leadership. And so I was committed to at least give it a try and to push myself further. And so that's why when I saw some examples of some really not great leadership, that's part of why I took that on, because that definitely gets to the psychological safety, because at the end of the day, these are human beings accomplishing the mission, trying to get the job done. And so as a leader, I'm invested in that whole person. Not just have I provided them the right tools, am I removing the barriers to their effectiveness to get the job done, but am I taking care of them as a person? And so when I was first a commander, that was one of the things that I shared with my lieutenants was, look, you've got the freedom to fail. It
Mm,
doesn't mean that I'm going to tolerate malfeasance or sloppiness or laziness or any unethical behavior. Those are bright lines. You know that those are no-goes. As a leader, that's the minimum. Those are table stakes. But if you're not finding the boundaries, if you're not screwing things up a little bit here and there, if it's not getting a little bit messy, I'm not sure that you are pushing far enough. And
mm,
I'm not sure that I'm doing my job as a leader to make sure that you're trying new things, because it's the mistakes, it's the failures that are the learning opportunities. When things go exactly the way that we planned, we don't tend to learn very much. It feels good, and
mm,
we can take a great sense of pride and accomplishment in a job well done, and we should, but we don't learn as much from that. It's when it doesn't go according to plan that we've got a chance to learn. And so I think that was my first introductions to the idea of using failures or mistakes as a learning opportunity. And in fact, I try not to call them that anymore. I'm finding myself right now not necessarily wanting to say those words. I mean, they're a real thing, but I've often tried to reframe so that what is the learning opportunity here? And it's not like we're taking a lackadaisical attitude toward goals or trying to accomplish the mission. Um, quite the contrary. We want to make sure that we're pushing ourselves and doing our best work so that we can get to that outcome. So these are all things that come into that. You're quite right about, of course, the physical safety, and that's one of the things that as a leader I need to attend to, is to make sure that I've given my team the right training, the right tools, so that we can keep each other safe. But it goes further than that, and trying to create that emotional space as well. And so that's a lesson that has translated very nicely to the civilian sector when I'm working with
mhm,
leaders. Is are you shooting the messenger, or are you trying to
mm,
use this as an opportunity to learn? Have you made
mm.
it safe to try, like we talked about earlier?
Yeah, it's all about learning.
Right.
That's yeah, and a leader I worked with years ago, he shared a phrase with me that I believe his dad gave him, and he turned fail into an acronym, which stood for first attempt in learning.
I've heard that before. That's a good one. Yeah,
Yeah,
right
it's
on. I
really
appreciate
good.
the
It's
reminder.
really
Yeah.
good. And yeah, what a great way just to think about the mistakes differently. So I want to move into fit because we've talked a lot about security, but environment is and we also know from research that it's all about person activity fit, and I would say person environment fit for something to be effective. What works for me might not work for you because we're all unique individuals. And one of the things that I see a lot of leaders struggle with is, somebody's asking for flexibility and we are in shift work. Or I need, somebody to be willing to travel because this is a core part of the job and I can't change anything about the job, but they want to be home with their family. So I think fit is becoming as people's values have changed, as the world continues to change, a struggle, especially from an environmental standpoint and a job environment standpoint. So, how, what can leaders do to help their team find the right fit for their environment where people don't have full control of their
Mm.
job or the environmental conditions of their job?
Great question. There's a couple things that come to mind right away, and I'll borrow from my military experience again for this one. One thing that I love to remind my soldiers of on a regular basis, especially when we had, because we were usually I was a signal officer, so I was in charge of communications, and so that's often what my team had to do, was to ensure that the communication systems were operational, which meant interfacing with other parts of our unit. And so, or even supporting elements on whatever base if we're in a forward operating zone. And so I would often remind them, look, people are going to live up to or down to your expectations. And so
Mhm.
if you come in there expecting the worst, it tends to play out the way that you think about. And so um, it doesn't necessarily mean, and it's not about a happy-go-lucky, naive approach. But if we go in with an assumption that I'm coming from a place of positive intent, they're coming from a place of positive intent, we're going to do some great stuff together, we're much more likely to have an interesting creative outcome that we would not have anticipated otherwise. And so that's one thing when I think about fit, is that what we're thinking internally can show up whether we
Mm,
realize it or not, and
mm,
it can become a sort of a self-reinforcing feedback loop. So that's one of the ways that I think about fit. Um, I'm working with a leader just this week, actually, and he's struggling with the realization that somebody that he hired in a more entry level role and has been there for a lot of years suddenly doesn't seem like he fits in the role
Mm,
that is being asked of him. And so that's something we're working on a little bit. And I'd love to bring up Patty McCord. And I don't know if you're familiar with her background, her story, but she was the first chief people officer at Netflix. I heard her on a podcast years ago, and she talked about this idea that it's much more humane and, to use Brene Brown, clear as kind, it's much more effective if there's not a fit to quickly and decisively take action, and not from a
mm,
place of cruelty. We can part ways with somebody in a respectful manner and do it in a way that keeps their ego intact. It doesn't have to be. I mean, there's going to be it's going to be a little bit of a traumatic experience, but it doesn't have to be as bad as it could be otherwise. And so it was all about, if you've realized that this person doesn't fit, tell them, hey,
mm,
this isn't working out. We hired you for X, and now things have changed, and we really need Y, and it doesn't seem like you've got the skills to accomplish that. Uh, Whatever the case might be, maybe the market changed, maybe the company changed, maybe the technology changed. Change is always happening, of course. But her point was, instead of getting into a 90-day plan or putting them on the
mm,
PIP, which just sucks for everybody. It's demoralizing for the employee. They know that what this is all about. And so they're operating from a place of fear now. So they're not going to do the best work. It's tedious for me as a leader. Now I've got to micromanage. I've got to make sure that I've got to hold their feet to the fire. And so it just sucks all around. And she's all about, let's just cut that charade off, and let's part ways in a way that is respectful and kind, but decisive and immediate. And the irony, the punchline, of course, is that that's how she got fired some years later, when
mhm,
Netflix had grown and had outgrown her capabilities as a leader. But
mhm,
anyway, maybe a longer story than I needed to tell about fit, but those are a couple of things that I think about right away. But the other thing I can't help but touch on is strengths. Is that
mm,
everyone's got talent, everyone's got strengths, and I think as a leader, that's always our challenge, is to create the kind of environment where people can play to their strengths.
mm,
Early on in my career, I realized that this idea of the model corporate citizen, that we're trying to make the well-rounded individual, and we're trying to fix our deficiencies, something always felt a little bit wrong to me about that. And of course, based on the research and what we know about positive psychology, what that misses is that we're not playing to people's strengths. Everybody's good at something. My job as a leader is to unlock that. Now, it doesn't mean that we ignore our weaknesses or deficiencies. We've got to make sure that we're aware of that and we're doing something about it. But from a personal level, if we can play to our strengths, we're much more likely to fit and have a whole lot more fun doing what we're doing.
yeah. So, I mean, I think there's a couple of nuggets to pull out of that, that I think under the surface of it are about both, direct, clear, but also conversation. And whether that's conversation with yourself, conversation with others, identifying what people's values are rather than making assumptions, identifying what your own values are and seeing where there are matches and mismatches, identifying what your strengths are and your talents are, even those that maybe you're not using so much day to day basis. And again, seeing where there's opportunity for misses and matches. There's little ways to bring that in more and more. And even, sometimes when certain aspects of the role don't allow for flexibility in your environment, there might be ways that you can bring in other flexibility to be a better fit for you, or have that acknowledgement that maybe this was something that was a good fit for my environmental needs at one point, but as things have changed for me, as priorities have changed, it no longer is, and now I have a sense of what's important to me, and we can part with grace. And that idea of conversation, I think the question as we wrap up that I would love to ask is, what are some questions that leaders can ask to get a better sense of how well their team's environment is actually a good fit for their team, providing psychological safety for their team, helping people feel like they can be at their best?
Mm. Love this. And I feel like I could go on and on about the questions. But I think, to your point, it starts with the conversation. And I think as a leader, that's where we need to start, is demonstrating the willingness to be in conversation about how we can make this better and how we can improve the environment. And so it can be as simple as asking, um, what else do you need right now?
Mm,
What will help you play at your best?
mm,
Um, you know, of course, the caveat with that is you've always got to make it okay for people to provide feedback, and you've always got to be inviting feedback, but you've got to do something with it, because the worst thing you can do is take on board feedback and not acknowledge it, not acknowledge it, or not do anything at all. And now, granted, we can't always do everything that people ask for. We often are operating in a space of limited constraints. Nonetheless, the least we can do is at least acknowledge it. Hey, I hear
mm,
you. I see where you're coming from. I'm making a trade-off between this or that, and so we probably can't get to that right away. But you've called out something important that I think matters to all of us. It's as simple as that. Just being authentic and real. And just, people are walking BS detectors, so don't phone it in if you can't do something. Um, but I think those are some good ones, and I feel like well, I could get off on a whole nother tangent about burnout, because I'm taking a burnout
uh,
coaching course right now. But one of the questions that Neha Sengwan talks about in her Talk RX is, um, if your heart could talk to me right now,
mm,
if you could speak from the heart, what would your heart say? Now, that
mm.
might feel a little touchy feely for some leaders. And so you've got to be in a space of vulnerability to do that, which I think is just as important to being an effective leader. But just tapping into, how are people doing at an emotional level? And that
Mm.
can give you some indicators of where might we need to make some adjustments so that people do feel safe, so the environment does uh, help them do their best work.
Yeah. So if you feel like you can lean into that, really deep question, I think Niels gave you a great one to start with. And if you need something a little safer and a lens of safety, to Neil's point, even asking, what's one small thing that I could do this week to make it easier for you to share your opinion, to help your, environment, your work feel more aligned with your strengths, to help you be at your best, and really committing to listening to what that is. That can be a really important starting point for you to uncover the small shifts that you can make to help create a better environment that provides the safety people need to do their best work, not just individually, but collectively, and create things that are a fit and a match for people's values and strengths. So, as we wrap, Niels, what's the best way if people want to talk more with you, get a hold of you? How can they reach out to you?
Thanks. Well, the best way is usually LinkedIn, where we are right now.
Yep.
It tends to be a great way to get me, or my website, nielsgott.com. And so those are probably the easiest ways to track me down.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Niels, for always creating a wonderful shadow of a leader yourself. I don't even want to call it a shadow. It's like it's more like a light.
Uh,
It's a leadership light. So thank you for creating a leadership light. And for those of you, whether you've joined us live or you're listening after the fact, think about your own environment from that lens of sense of security and sense of fit for you. What's supporting you? What's constraining you? And what's one small shift you can make to enhance your environment so that you can thrive in it and help others do the same? Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Jordana. This was a ton of fun.
Be well.